Welcome to Legacy Capsule, where we explore the intriguing stories that have influenced American history. On June 25th, 1876, the Battle of the Little Bighorn led to the total annihilation of 5 companies from the U.S. 7th Cavalry under the command of George Armstrong Custer. Among those present was White Wolf, who later recounted how young men scavenged through the bodies of fallen soldiers, finding square green paper currency in their pockets. This unfamiliar form of money was later repurposed by children as saddle blankets for their toy mud horses. Furthermore, silver coins were discovered, which the Cheyenne used to craft silver buckles. Other warriors present, such as Wooden Leg, Little Hawk, and Bobtail Horse, reported finding bottles of whiskey among the deceased troopers. 2 days after the battle, on June 27, cavalry troops arrived to observe the grim aftermath of the conflict. Lieutenant Edward S. Godfrey vividly described the haunting sight of marble-white soldiers' bodies alongside the brown remains of horses and ponies scattered across the battlefield, particularly near Custer Hill. The dry, reddish-brown grass contrasted sharply with the pale earth, creating a chilling image of death and desolation that left a lasting impression on him. He remarked that the scene was one he would remember for the rest of his life. Captain Tom Custer was found near the summit of the hill, just north of the general, lying face down. His features were so distorted that he was unrecognizable. His body bore numerous arrow wounds, including injuries to his back and head, where an arrowhead was bent and deeply embedded. His skull had been fractured, and nearly all of his hair had been scalped, leaving only a small patch at the nape of his neck. In stark contrast, General Custer's body was found unharmed. He was discovered lying on his back with his hands placed on his abdomen, a position familiar to those who had marched alongside him, as they had often seen him napping in this manner. He had suffered 2 fatal wounds, one to the front of his left temple and another near his heart. Boston Custer, the youngest of the Custer brothers, was found approximately 200 yards from Custer Hill. His body was entirely stripped, save for his white cotton socks, which had their labels removed. Numerous bodies scattered across the battlefield displayed remnants of bloody undershirts, trousers, or socks. Yet in every case, their names had been removed. The horrifying sight of the naked, mutilated corpses, marked by fatal injuries, created a scene of deep distress. Among the limited tools available were half a dozen spades and shovels, a few axes, and a couple of picks. The soldiers attempted to bury their fallen comrades as best as they could. Using knives and tin cups, they hastily covered the bodies with a thin layer of soil, leaving them in the vast wilderness, hundreds of miles from civilization and far from the comforting presence of their families. Trumpeter Giuseppe Martini recalled seeing a pile of deceased soldiers in a deep ravine located between Custer's position and the river. Among them was a first sergeant whose body was adorned with torn pieces of approximately $500 in paper currency, which had been entrusted to him for safekeeping by those he commanded. Martini also observed that part of Adjutant Cook's sideburns had been scalped, with the skin still attached. 7th Cavalry Scout George Harrington reported that 4 soldiers' heads were found in the Sioux camp, severed from their bodies, which could not be located on the battlefield or within the village. Lieutenant Charles Rowe of the 2nd Cavalry observed that a white man's head was found in the Indian village, tied to a lariat, having been dragged through the area until it separated from the body. Survivor Jacob Adams recounted that soldiers were lassoed from their horses and drawn into the center of the village, where they were tied to trees and burned alive. These horrific events were witnessed by their fellow soldiers from Benteen's division, who were unable to intervene. John Ryan later noted that bones and pieces of blue uniforms were found at the sites where men had been secured to trees and stakes. Of the 5 guidons carried by Custer's troops during their final stand, only one was recovered shortly after the battle. It had been hidden beneath the body of a fallen soldier, Corporal John Foley, who had tried to escape on horseback. As he was chased by warriors, Foley took his own life before he could be captured. This retrieved flag later became known as the Culbertson Guten, named in tribute to Sergeant Ferdinand Culbertson, a member of the burial party that discovered it. Thank you for joining us on Legacy Capsule. We invite you to subscribe and accompany us on this journey through history. We eagerly anticipate your presence in the next episode.